As a nurse in intensive care, Michelle McNeil saw firsthand the debilitating effects of serious illness. But she loved her job. She was 29 years old, healthy, happily married, living a full active life, until the day she noticed a change.
In the morning, I usually parked a few blocks away from work, so when I walked to work, I would have achiness in the legs, achiness in my knees. I thought, oh, it's just the cold. I'm overworked, too much lifting the day before, whatever. So, you know, it was those kinds of things.
At first, all the signs seemed to indicate a touch of the flu. Michelle stayed home for a few days, but the symptoms not only lingered, they got worse.
I ended up with an infection, what I called a sinusitis or a cold. And about 3 days later, I thought, well, I'd better go to the doctor and get some antibiotics, you know, normal routine.
Michelle was soon to find out that what was happening to her was anything but routine.
At the time that it happened, it was at night. I was reading, and I went to my husband, and I'd already been sick for, you know, probably about a week. And he looked at me and he just shook his head and he just went, "You need to go to the doctor."
What her husband saw was a noticeable droop on one side of Michelle's face, as if the muscles had just let go. She felt a numbness there and was having problems hearing. She thought she was having a stroke, but when she went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with something called Bell's palsy. The only prescription her doctor could offer was steroids.
My choice at that time was, do I go on high-dose steroids, or the alternative was do nothing and wait and see. And I thought, well, what do I have to lose? My background being medicine, let's try the steroids. So I went on the steroids for a 10-day regime.
The steroids helped, but the symptoms returned as soon as Michelle stopped taking them. There were side effects too: restlessness, aggressive behavior, problems sleeping. And when the symptoms did return, she felt worse than before.
Every time I started coming down, I got worsening symptoms in terms of visual problems. My droop came back, inner ear pain, that kind of thing.
With her own medical background, Michelle knew that there were several explanations for her symptoms, none of them good. Anything from multiple sclerosis to a brain tumor.
I started noticing soreness in my hands and a little bit in my legs, but mostly in my hands. And I love to work with my hands. I'm creative that way, sewing, you know, making bears, whatever that is. And I had problems doing that. And so I went to my doctor, and she got me an appointment with a rheumatologist, and she diagnosed me with fibromyalgia.
Fibromyalgia seems to appear either on its own or as the result of infection, stress, or physical trauma. Unlike arthritis, which is painful inflammation of the joints, fibromyalgia attacks the soft tissue around the joints, such as the muscles and tendons. Fibromyalgia is difficult to diagnose because it cannot be seen on X-rays, in blood tests, or muscle biopsies, and often symptoms are mistakenly thought to be psychosomatic. The symptoms, however, were very real and getting worse. Getting out of bed, even going to the bathroom, was a major ordeal for Michelle.
I got worsening vision in my left eye. I lost my speech to the point that I couldn't even carry on a conversation like we're having now. I stuttered. Problems with just trying to find my words in terms of thought processes. It was a scary time for Michelle, especially since her own profession didn't seem to have a solution. Then her mother read an article about a therapy called myosymmetries and urged her daughter to give it a try. Myosymmetries uses an advanced form of biofeedback to assess chronic pain. With a background in neurology and muscle pain research, Stuart Donaldson became interested in biofeedback in the early 80s and discovered that sometimes when one muscle is dormant or near dormant due to trauma, its counterpart on the other side of the body has to work twice as hard and can become chronically tired and painful. People with fibromyalgia are particularly tender in specific areas of the body called trigger points.
Pain is the single most powerful stimulus that you want to avoid. And so people start to learn coping techniques that alter the way they function very subtly. You change the way you walk slightly or the way you pick up something slightly in order to avoid pain. And in doing that, you cause secondary pain. And it just becomes a cascading, snowballing effect, and eventually can encompass the whole body.
Each trigger point sends a signal of pain to the brain, and this constant barrage eventually starts to affect the brain's activity. It's no wonder that symptoms of fibromyalgia also include a kind of mental fog or forgetfulness.
They lose their ability to concentrate, the immediate memory or recall goes, and they lose their ability to multitask. They couldn't sit here and watch, say, the TV monitor right now. If an ambulance was going by, they'd get distracted by the ambulance.
I was constantly stuck in light sleep mode, and which meant I didn't have the ability to go up into a higher thought process in terms of when you're driving through a blizzard. You need to be very sharp and in tune with what's going on. My brain didn't have that ability to do that.
Michelle decided to give myosymmetries a try, but not without some skepticism.
When it came to this, it was a definite stretch from where I had come from and what I had learned at being a nurse, especially in intensive care. So he sat down with me and basically went through a treatment regime, what I could expect in terms of data, what would I see in front of me in terms of what my body might be presenting that I have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. So I thought, well, what do I, let's go for it. Let's have an assessment.
The brain scans showed serious imbalances in Michelle. Certain brain waves were stuck while others were overstimulated.
What we believe is happening with the fibromyalgia is a constant bombardment of the brain by the pain signal sensitizes the brain to the pain signal, and it alters the way the brain then works, and that produces the symptoms that we call fibromyalgia.
Over the course of the next 8 months, Michelle went through a series of treatments, including physical therapy, EMG and EEG biofeedback, and trigger point massage therapy. Muscle groups were tested with electrodes, and certain muscles were given specific exercises to rebuild and rebalance them. To deal with Michelle's memory and concentration problems, Donaldson put her through a form of treatment called light therapy.
And the light therapy is basically hooking up of electrodes to your scalp, monitored by a computer. The computer actually sends light waveforms through a set of glasses that you're wearing and reprograms through the optic nerve your brain in terms of re-stimulating it to a normal waveform.
Gradually, Michelle began to see improvements, but she wasn't about to put all the responsibility for her recovery in someone else's hands. She changed her diet and began taking herbal supplements, and she took steps to deal with the emotional stresses in her life.
I started working with different emotions like de-stressing, moving emotions, letting things go, not holding on to things, not taking on other people's stuff was a big issue.
It took commitment and hard work, but eventually Michelle's journey brought her back to good health. She returned to work and fulfilled one of her dreams, to start a family.
The journey that I went through has taught me that I have will, I have choice, and that I can do and need to do whatever I have to do to get better in whatever circumstance that is. It's there. It's just we have to be able to look within ourselves to be able to go for it.